And I've said before, I was like, man, look at what happened to MKC. If we had to do Winterstrong for 5 years for that to happen, great. Again, if there's ever a question why we're doing this,
right?
Like, there it is. Like, there's the legacy that we leave, because like you and I could slide off a mountain anytime. If more people in our stratosphere or whatever you want to call it are being more successful and matching their dreams, then the stock of the whole community is rising.
Yeah.
Yeah,
how was Winterstrong or Summerstrong?
Summerstrong was awesome. It was kind of as it always is. It's always, exciting. Everyone freaking brings their A game, and what I learned though is kind of interesting. Just like Winterstrong, I've learned Summerstrong and Winterstrong. There's like a hangover, and I think we talk about like, oh, it's over. It's all the the fun stuff. But I put my finger on it. There's a literal depression that comes with it.
Really?
Yeah, and so Ryan Krauser, world record holder in the shot put, he was at Summerstrong, spoke on Saturday. The next Saturday, he broke the world record in the shot, which was pretty cool.
And my kids showed me online because Sadie's a shot putter. She was like,
right.
Dad.
I was just like, oh, that'd be so
didn't
sweet.
he almost hit the back wall, right, of the pit?
Yes.
Is that the video?
Yes. The wall is like 24.
He like short hopped it.
Short, like, boom, boom. Yeah, like 6 inches off. And they had just put that wall up there, which at the time was like 2 feet over the world record.
You know what he was thinking when
dude.
he saw that. He's like,
I think if you mow down on that wall.
I'm hitting that wall.
So, and you watch the video, like he strokes it, and like he knows he nailed it. And I talked to him, he's like, oh yeah, that was it. He goes, I knew halfway through the throw it was gone.
Really?
Yeah. And he's like, he's like, when I lined it up, he's like, here it goes.
How much did he beat it by?
About 7-8 inches off his world record from 2 years ago at the Olympic trials, which was like a foot PR over the 31-year-old world record too. So,
damn.
So he's put
a foot is a lot too.
Stupid amount. Stupid.
It's like winning the 100 by a full second.
Yes.
Like,
yeah. It's like
when everyone else is within 2/10 of a second.
Yeah. A couple centimeters is like, oh man.
Hey, cheers. By the way.
Hey, thanks for having me. Yeah. I assume we're rolling.
Mm-hmm. We are.
So yeah.
So anyway, he was saying
so a couple centimeters is, you would be happy to break a world record like that.
Yeah.
So for him to bomb over a foot at an Olympic trials, go to the Olympics and then only went 3 centimeters less than his world record at the Olympics, which never happens. I don't remember the last time a world record in the throws has been broken at the Olympics. It just doesn't happen.
Really? It's amazing because that's when you're the most, like I would assume that's the pinnacle of your career. That's when you're the most hyped up. You've
Correct.
Trained the most. You've done all the mental preparedness, like anything you can
tapered, you're everything. Yeah, I honestly don't know if it's ever happened. And it's throwing is so streaky, and there's so many variables. There's wind. There's just not with a shot put necessarily, but there's all these other variables. Whereas like 100 is like a pretty gross motor skill. Like I'm wired for sound. Boom, hit it right. But, you try a little too hard and you're a little bit off. Like, so like the world record in the throws is like a game of reps. If you're at a world-class level and you throw 100 competition throws this year, you have a pretty good chance at doing something special. But give someone 6 throws, it's like,
Yeah.
So for him to do it then so a year and a half later, Summerstrong talks about it. He kind of talks about winning and the golds and everything, world record. And I introduced him and I said, next week in LA, he's probably going to break the world record.
No shit.
Yeah. And then he goes and blasts it. Right. So the cool part is he and I a couple weeks ago were talking couple weeks after. And I'm like, how you doing? He's like, oh, I'm doing good. Like, how you really doing? He's like, I'm a little down. I'm like, interesting. So we got talking and he and I were both like in the same trough.
Yeah.
And what he said, he goes, yeah, I don't really tell a lot of people. He said, but every time I've won an Olympic gold, a world championship, or broken a world record, I'm like really depressed right afterwards.
Really?
And I go, and it's weird. Every Summerstrong and Winterstrong, I am like super down the next week. And it's not an emotional, I'm sad.
Right.
One part, you're like, oh, I'm sad it's over. But we were talking about there's such a dopamine and serotonin hit that's so high, and it fills up all your receptor sites. Any kind of sine wave, you have to have the opposite side of it. And he and I have talked. He was like, he goes, 2 days, day after you break the world record, he goes, I'm on the couch. I don't want to work out. He goes, I don't want to eat. And like he gave all these signs. He goes, those are all the classical depression signs. And I just did the thing that's never been done.
Yeah.
And he goes, it doesn't make sense. It's not what I want, but it's what I'm feeling, and I have to be accurate about it. And so it was interesting. Long story short was, I just came out of this, we had our national conference, which we just destroyed. The next week was Winterstrong. The next week, during Winterstrong, we installed University of Alabama football and Missouri football.
Which was unbelievable.
Which was our biggest college contract ever. And it's Bama, right? So you look and you're like, oh, right, like these 4 monster dopamine hits in 20 days straight. And I'm like, oh, right, that's why I want to be in a dark room and not talk to anyone for a week.
Yeah.
And I'm mad, I'm irritable and all this. And it's like, this is so stupid. Life is so amazing. Yeah. And you're like, oh, right, I just need to set out a couple rounds. That's what it is. And so it's interesting. I kind of watch guys like yourself, guys that have had extreme success. And, I would even say you guys out there that kind of get to ride that ride, which is a rare ride, you got to watch it at times because – you wouldn't think that, but and even as Ryan said, he goes, I feel like such a whatever, going I'm moping because I just broke the world record. He goes, I'm just telling you what I'm feeling. It's just science. It's just chemicals in the brain.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I was telling Jess too, she was asking me about, if I was excited last week about the bear hunt, right? We took Derek Wolf on a bear hunt, and she was asked me if I was excited about it. And I'm like, it's weird because I'm trying to be, but also we're so busy.
Yes.
And then I know that going on that's going to put us farther behind. And I know right after that we've got TAC coming up.
Right.
And it's just stacking these things on each other. And it's the same thing. It sounds like you're complaining. And quite frankly, when we went to the first TAC in 2020 in 2020, and I just showed a couple of my knives to a couple of people, and Jess and I walked around and shot. That was a highlight event. And I'm like, right. I should be super excited about all these things, but it's just that constant buildup of excitement and hype and everything, and then one after the other, and you actually don't get a chance to just recharge a little bit.
Yes.
You don't actually get that chance to have that little down after it.
You don't. Yeah. And when our expectations get so high as high achievers, and we're both driving and going, right? I think looking back, probably my first TAC when I'm going to go walk around. Kip was like, dude, you ought to go to this event. And I walked around and shot and talked to everybody. I was like, this is super great. Yeah. And I liked when you and we got our bungalow on the side of the highway.
Yeah. That was awesome.
That was actually super fun. And, but yeah, then of course you start bringing a booth and you have expectations and you have to do this and there's meetings and it's like, wow, this sounds like a lot of work now. Yeah. I mean, it feels like work.
Well, and I felt bad because Danny came in literally the day of our last day of bear camp, and he actually drove down to camp and stayed that night and then helped us pull down the wall tent and bring home all the stuff. And I know Danny would have loved to have shot content this weekend and whatnot. And I told him, I kind of made a decision of I said, look, I've been gone a ton from my family. I've missed a ton of stuff. And I said, then TAC starts, then they go on a family vacation with their mom, then TAC in Park City happens and all these other things. And I said, this weekend, I'm going to all of my daughter's softball games here in town. Sure. And ideally, from a company perspective, I probably should have taken the raft out and fished one day. And then we probably should have taken our Go Fast camper and made some content with that. And we should have probably done a bunch of different stuff. And I kind of just and he was coming to town. It was he was in between things. So he just came here, which was awesome. And we had a great time. But I told him, I'm like, at some point you just have to say no.
Yes.
And just carve out, I'm going to go to every one of her games, every one of my boys' basketball games. And then I think he saw how insane the schedule was around here because all the games they were playing, Hank was playing, Macy was playing, all the stuff Sadie was doing. And he was like, it's like this all the time. And I'm like, yeah, every weekend. And then during the week it's camps and all the other stuff. And
you told me Hank's schedule the other day was ridiculous.
Yeah, no, it's been absolutely insane between weightlifting and driver's ed threw a kink in it, but then football camp and basketball camp. Yeah, it's just busy. It's just busy. Right. But I mean, the other thing is everybody listening to this is going and doing their job and they're busy too. Yes. And they probably wish they were going to TAC or bear camp. So it's hard to sit here and bitch about any of it. I'm very thankful.
1,000%. But the other side of it is there is a psychological, chemical. There is a response to it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've kind of said before, like, especially May for me, it's just boom, 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 boom. I was like, it's like if you saw Led Zeppelin one night, AC/DC the next night, Creedence Clearwater Revival the next night. Even if like the Who was playing the fourth night, you'd probably be like, I'm probably going to stay home for a minute.
Yeah.
Like I'm just kind of tracer burnout right now.
Yeah.
And it's awesome. And you're like, but I can't miss it. It's an event. And you're like, okay, if I want to like survive, I probably need to go to bed at 8:00 tonight.
I've actually heard Aaron Snyder talk about this, talking about like high country mountain mule deer hunting, or even like the bear hunting.
Which is just the worst thing ever to do.
Yeah.
Freaking mule deer.
Mule deer have got Bert Sorin's number.
They do.
God dang.
I mean, whitetails seem to like come and sit in my lap.
The only thing you need to do to make it harder on yourself is add elevation to it.
Right. Or
make it more
or
miserable.
a bell on my hat would maybe help out more.
But we were down at bear camp and we were talking about how difficult the hiking was in those mountains. I mean, it's very aggressive, very difficult hiking. And I've heard Aaron even talk about like if you're going on like say an 8-day high country mountain mule deer hunt, 8 or 10 days, which is a long time to be in the mountains. We were talking about, you know, when you go in the mountains one day and you hike really hard, that's one thing. Okay, now you stack day 2 on it and stack day 3. A lot of times when you're out there, you feel like you should always be hunting. But,
right.
Excuse me, I've heard Aaron say day 3 or 4, it's not a terrible idea to just hang around the tent and recharge. Because if you go day 5 and 6 and 7,
yep.
I don't care if it's in business, like a lot of the stuff we're doing,
sure,
whatever. If you don't force a day of recovery or even a morning of recovery in where it's like, okay, I'm not going to crawl out of my tent at daylight or before.
Right.
I'm going to sleep in until 10 or 11. I'm going to make some lunch, and then I'm going to head out and maybe do a pretty easy evening hunt, and then tomorrow get back after it.
Yeah.
But you're actually going to be more effective and have a better chance of actually killing something for real, like and making a move on it and being mentally in the game. And aware of the wind and your smell and noise and everything.
Right, versus just Bataan Death March and just, hey, we got to do it. Yeah, no.
Because like you said, if you burn yourself out in those first 4 days, and then you just come home, you now wasted 5 days of a 10-day hunt.
Yes.
Instead of 1 in the middle.
Right.
You know, you wasted the whole back half of your hunt because you just finally said, I'm so beat, so miserable, I'm quitting. There's no deer in here.
And the quality of your moves.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you see that from business. You know, I know when you're super worn out, frustrated, whatever, sometimes it's better just to take a walk and, recalibrate so you don't do something emotionally stupid.
Yeah.
I know, like, when I was training back for Highland Games years ago, I mean, it sounds so funny, like, knowing a guy like a Cam who, I don't know how many days in a row that guy could go in the mountains, but it's
yeah, Cam's listening to this podcast going, you pussies.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Cam, but let's just be real here. But no, but yeah, Cam's just a whole freak, different animal. But when I was at my strongest, Jason Lawson and I, we call him Cyborg. I think you know Jason. You know Parker, his son. Mm-hmm. So he and I he was high-level strongman. I was high-level Highland Games. And our 2 rules were never train 2 days in a row, and when in doubt, go home and rest.
Oh, really?
And it was wild because we got so strong.
Really?
It was bonkers because when we were there,
given your chance for recovery,
we were going to burn it down.
Right.
And we used to joke, we're like, yeah, you could squat 500 in here and turn someone's head, but you better be supersetting it with something. Like it just better be like just part of work, right?
Yeah.
And we look back and we're like, how did we get that strong? And we were never injured. We're like, oh, right, because we never trained 2 days in a row. So we always had a day of rest. We always ate a bunch, and you come back in and you blow it up, and then you go home and rest. You blow home and rest, and in a year, like I think I got up to 260, he got up to 320, and we were strong as shit. That's
the kind of stuff I need you to tell Hank, because he's in the gym, every single day doing his stuff, but also like getting him to eat.
Oh, that's the biggest thing.
And he's a growing kid, like he's 15.
And he's a monster,
too. And getting him to actually. Like, because a lot of times, a lot of this early morning workout stuff they do, he'll just wake up kind of at the last possible moment and go to the gym. And not only does he go to the gym, then he goes straight into driver's ed, then into basketball. And like 2 p.m, he's like, I'm starving.
Yeah, because you're on a giant caloric deficit.
Yeah. And it's like, well, you're actually, all that working out you did this morning, like you're not going to build if you're not fueling yourself.
No. I mean, he'll get lean.
Right.
But, at 15, when he's 6'4", 6'5",
6'2", 6'3",
yeah, I mean, you could be a monster, but that was what we'd learned. And then again, a mountain hunter is a different animal than when you're trying to be a strength athlete.
Right.
But it was so funny. We always had to hold ourselves back. That's why we had to make the rule, because there was always the, hey, all right, see you tomorrow. And it's like, hold on. The rule is we don't, right? And then, but you're chomping at the bit. You're ready to tear someone's face off the day after when you come in, because you're like, dude, I've been sitting at home and relaxing and like getting massage and eating, and like I'm ready to break some bars.
Yeah.
And it was like kind of almost cheating how fast you improve.
Yeah. Well, I gotta say, we kind of got going into this, but it's a huge honor, and it feels like a kind of big moment for me having you sitting here in this podcast studio in this shop, because I owe a lot of everything that we've built in the last couple of years to you and your company, your family, your employees. You know, this building has largely resulted a lot from what you built with Winterstrong and what you facilitated, what you made possible for my company. So,
wow. Oh man, I'm a huge fan. I'm super stoked. You're an awesome friend, and I watch what you're doing, and I get inspired like crazy. I'm like, oh my gosh, like look how hard and how fast and just how courageous they are, and like it's awesome. It's freaking awesome. Like, so it's that you say that, I appreciate it, but it's like I feel super honored to maybe play one little drop of success in what you're doing, and then I get to watch from the front row.
Well, it gets me, it's not just one little drop that you had in that, but yeah, it gets me, I didn't think I was going to get emotional. I've never cried on a podcast, but
you know, make me cry. This is going to be a weird podcast.
I know.
Two big dudes crying.
Well, I
get it, man.
I explained, I talked for years about what I wanted to build for this company and what I wanted to do. And I told guys forever, and I'm sure a lot of people thought I was full of shit, was never going to do it. And I kept talking about what I wanted to do. And, you know, one of my foremen at work, you know, he was actually in our booth this year down in Salt Lake, but I used to sit up in the bucket truck and tell him in my old job, like, we talked about MKC and the idea of this and all this stuff. And, you know, when I made those prototypes, I was working for the power company, and I came down to Winterstrong and showed those knives around. And
shout out to Neil Kamimura for setting that up.
Yes, Neil invited me down, shared the spotlight of the forge down there.
Yeah.
And you know, I didn't know what I was getting into, and it was an amazing group of people that I'd never been around. So many people that were so driven, so accomplished, but also so supportive. And everybody there like gave me that like feeling that it was possible and that you could do it and that you had support. And that's really all I needed, because quite honestly, like when you live in a small town and you kind of like have these big aspirations, these big ideas of like thinking you might be able to build something, but then you look around, you're like, yeah, but nobody else around here is doing that. So like, is that really possible? Like, that's probably not possible. Like, it's not possible in Frenchtown, Montana to do like build a brand, right?
Or Irmo, South Carolina.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so, you know, when Jess and I walked away from that event, there was just this feeling of like, we're going to do this. We're going to absolutely get after this. And that was really when COVID was just striking.
Yeah.
When we came to Winterstrong that year of 2020, February, on the way out on the TVs in the airports, we flew through Dallas. I remember it like it was yesterday. A couple people were wearing masks.
Yep.
But it was just, it was on the news, but it wasn't anything that we were even really paying attention to. No one discussed it at Winterstrong that weekend that I remember really at all that weekend. But then traveling back home and over the next 5 days, it was becoming like a thing. That was now like, I want to say that event was like 3rd, 4th, 5th of February. And by like
something 12th, yeah, it was right, maybe second week, yeah.
By the 10th of February or the 15th, like COVID was starting to roll, and by March 1st, the country was like shutting down.
Yeah,
it was that fast.
I was at an event, right? So I went and did Winterstrong, and it was like a week later. I was at D1 event where we build the equipment for their franchise, and I was at their like national thing, and the airport started shutting down. And I was in Nashville, like, holy crap, am I going to get home? Like, I could drive if I had to, but it was like literally sitting in my hotel going, hold on a minute. Like, this is like a real thing that's about to go down. Yeah. So I remember it like yesterday.
And the next year you were literally having people have to COVID test to come to your event.
Yeah. Because we weren't going to not do it. Right. But I remember sitting around the kitchen table. We bought a butt ton of COVID tests.
And I remember you saying, like, I remember you saying, like, I can't have a coach come home from my event and go get some damn professional athlete sick or even worse, someone at your event going home and dying from something they contracted at Sorin's event. I mean, it was crazy time. But
it was bonkers. I remember that first year, though. I think I can't remember if it was a Friday or Saturday night, and you were there. I remember exactly where we were standing, and you were showing me some of your knives, and I still have that first Josh Smith knife you gave me.
Yeah.
And I remember looking through, and I was like, oh, man, I really, really like this one. I walked over, and I showed Pops. I was like, which one's your favorite? And both of them, he and I both said, like, oh, that was my favorite. I was like, and I apologize. I didn't really know of you as a knife maker.
No.
More than what Neil had told me. Neil was like, hey, this guy was like the first, kind of gave me the whole spiel. Like, yeah, it sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I remember looking at your knives, and I remember going up to you. I'm like, dude, your stuff is awesome. And you gave me that knife, which I super appreciate. And you told me your plan. Like, hey, I was looking at doing this at like a production knife company. And I remember exactly where we were standing. And we were talking, and I remember you coming up to me, I think it was Saturday night, and you were with your wife. Is that accurate?
Yep.
And then you're like, we're going to do it.
Yeah.
And I was just, I probably had a couple drinks in me. So I was like, oh, awesome. That guy's pumped up.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you were so serious. You're like, no, like we're going to do this thing. And you even kind of said like, hey, and like the people that are here are going to be like the seed group of that. And I'm like, awesome. And I was not only I appreciated your balls just to say, hey, I'm going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But then you pouring into our community and my community and the community we collectively, help. And you did exactly what you said you were going to do. I would say there's probably not a person that was at Winterstrong 2020 that's not carrying a Montana knife, or that didn't in the next year.
Right.
And so like you going, I'm going to help these people out that were here, inspiring you and giving you that feedback. Like that was, in my opinion, that was a real deal move, because it showed me you were very serious. You were good with investing in your community.
Yeah.
You made an awesome product. I mean, I still have my first early one. I looked at it the other day, and you told me I probably need to put it away and stop carrying it in the woods. It's just all. And then I look back, and I'm like, when I watch your post or get to talk to you on the phone, I'm like, oh my gosh, like,
yeah,
you guys are on a rocket ship.
It's crazy. And I remember laying in our tent, Jess and I laying in our tent there at Winterstrong, and like telling her, like, we're going to do this. Like, we can do this. Like that I don't know what it is. And I can't really put a finger on what it is about being around so many people that are accomplished without egos, that are driven, but they're also still supportive. They're inquisitive, and they question, and they want to learn. Like, everything about that event just made me feel like it was possible. And I don't know what it was, but then when we came home, I just decided, like, I'm going to ignore this COVID thing. And I'm going to just chase my dream, because I frankly ran away from it in 2010 when I quit and I got hired on at the power company. In 2009, that was when the economy was crashing and everything was kind of shitty. The housing market crashed, and my waiting list was going from like 3 years to 3 months. And if you listen to the news back then, we were headed for a depression, and the world was ending. And, CNN's had breaking news every day since. The world's always ending. And you start to realize, like...
Yeah, I think they said Greta Thorn, whatever her name is, I think today was supposed to be the end of the world as her prediction a few years ago.
Oh, really? Well, shit.
Yes, we still got some time.
It's winter. It's summer solstice, and I'm with friends, so whatever. Let's go.
Real quick, did I ever tell you when the first time I went to Jocko's 2 years ago, we did his weight room, and I remember it was on the summer solstice, because the first time we'd ever met in person, he was like, all right, just come by the house. We're out dinner tonight. We're going to do the weight room the next day. And it was summer solstice. So I knock on the door, and I open it, and his like daughters go outside and they walk across to the beach. And then he just looks at me in the eye. He goes, it's the summer solstice. Winter. He goes, how do you put it? He goes, He goes, "Are you going to go down to the beach and state your intentions for this year?" And I was like, "Hi, I'm Bert." It was hilarious. And I guess, but it was so cool because his kids, I don't know if they've done it that year, or the year before, or every year since. He said on the summer solstice, they go down, longest day of the year, they sit on the beach, watch the sunset, and they state their intentions for the next coming year.
Oh, that's cool.
I was like, that's cool as shit. But
it sounds very Jocko thing to do.
It's very Jocko. Well, why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah.
I mean, it's the longest day of the year.
State our intentions.
Yes, you have the less sleep possible. Yeah,
I thought he was gonna say to you, today's summer solstice. Winter starts tomorrow.
yeah, it was. No, he's, as you well know, he's very straightforward. But I thought that was the perfect Jocko entrance that I got.
Yeah,
and I always remembers on the summer solstice, because prior to that, I've not cared at all. But then now that it is, I'm like, well.
It's actually kind of funny because Danny and I did an Instagram Live last night, and Danny said on the Instagram Live, he's like, "Oh, it's summer solstice," and we were like, "Oh, we're shooting bows out here on summer solstice, longest day of the year," and we did this whole Instagram Live and everything. Got all off there, and I wasn't reading the comments on it, and my wife was on there commenting, "Hey, dummies, it's summer solstice tomorrow," and so we got all done and like posted it, and then we walk in the house, and she's like, "You do know summer solstice is tomorrow?" I was like, "Oh shit."
Well,
like,
there you go.
I said, "Well, great, then we'll shoot with Bert and Cole tomorrow night on summer solstice."
And you got the Danny in the can.
Yeah, so
you
we're
got
good.
the content.
Yeah, but no, it's been amazing building and whatnot. But the only reason that this all happened was just really because of what Winterstrong facilitated, those relationships, and then it's just a tree that grows and branches keep coming off of it and more branches, and it's just it's an amazing family, and the amount of respect I have for you, the way you run your business, your family, the way that your wife supports you, and the way that you are as a father, like everything that you do is very, very inspiring. And
thanks, man.
Yeah,
well, we both have the secret weapon. We have amazing wives.
We do.
I mean people. I mean that's like the number one thing you could have is have a supportive spouse, right?
And I'll be fully honest, like. Part of the reason I didn't start this company for years before that is I didn't really feel like I had that before. And
sure.
And when I met Jess and I started telling her my idea before we went to Winterstrong, she was just like, "Well, you should quit your job and do this." And I was making those prototypes long before Winterstrong. I actually pulled up some pictures. I got my first sheet of blades cut in June of 19.
Wow.
So it was 6 months.
Yeah.
So when Neil invited me, that was just like a few weeks before Winterstrong, maybe a month at tops.
Yeah.
The plan of me doing MKC was going, but I didn't have the belief that it could work. Mm-hmm. Like it's this idea I talked about a long time. It took me 6 months to get those prototypes going. I was unsure, didn't know how to do it, and really just continuing to question myself and like,
sure.
Is it really worth investing time and money into? And the Winterstrong. MKC wasn't born from Winterstrong. Winterstrong's what gave me the confidence that MKC could actually work.
Right.
There's people that believe in it and actually think it's viable, and I guess I feel like just like if all these other accomplished people from all these other small towns all over the country can do their thing, then why can't I do mine? So MKC was beginning, but I'm just not sure whatever would have happened or if MKC would have worked the way that it did without like that. It was like having a spark and like the little fire is going, it's kind of in your hand, but then all of a sudden Winterstrong is the gas on the fire. Mm. And I don't know, like, is that something that would have smoldered along and burned for a while and finally give up on it? Would it have finally built into a raging fire? I don't know.
Sure.
But that MKC was just that fuel, or the Winterstrong was that fuel.
Oh man. That's
so
that kind of stuff. Like I've talked to people before, like even internally at the company, and they Sorinex, and most people or most everyone's down with it, but there's still always some questions, right? There's like, wait, we keep doing this outdoor event. We're a strength company built. Some of the people that just aren't in that world as much. Mm-hmm. And I've said before, I was like, man, look at what happened to MKC. Mm-hmm. I was like, if we had to do Winterstrong for 5 years for that to happen, mm-hmm. Great.
That's cool.
Great. Yeah. Perfect. And if we never do it again, like Or there's people that hit me all the time. There's a guy that just came to Winterstrong not too long ago. Another guy that came, Winterstrong, I'm not going to say his name, but he sent me this amazing letter. This is like 2 days ago. And he got invited to Winterstrong from Duncan, crazy Duncan Butler. And he sent me this email that like his whole life was changed because of the things that he ran into there and the people and the culture that imprinted on. Now he's training and he stopped drinking and he's eating better and he's getting more confident, and this thing happened bad in his life, but he just brushed it off and moved forward. And it's like, and I sent it to my guys. I go, again, if there's ever a question while we're doing this,
right?
Like,
yeah,
there it is. Like, there's the legacy that we leave. Cause like you and I could slide off a mountain anytime. Like,
right.
But to leave something good in this world. And I was listening to Rogan and Cam on the flight over, and they both talked about like liking to see people succeed. Like,
yeah.
And it's not a scarcity mindset. Like, if you sell 80 gazillion knives, that doesn't make my life worse.
Right.
Like,
right.
if you're all of a sudden blowing up and doing all these amazing things, like in fact, that makes my life better because my friends are being successful, and that's I see it like as a global stock of our team. No, it's not an official team, but it's like the big family, the culture. What if more people in our stratosphere or whatever
right.
you want to call it are being more successful and matching their dreams, then the stock of the whole community is rising.
Yeah.
Great.
And it's that whole, like Rogan has said on there, that rising tide lifts all boats, you know, and you don't know too, when relationships and things come back around, that, there may be a job someday that you guys get that come from us or from somebody 2 levels down that I introduce you to or whatever.
It's already happened. It's already happened.
And not that you guys need that, but whether it's me or it's anyone else that attends that event. Some things in marketing, it's interesting. Brandon and I actually have this discussion. I think Brandon and I are a pretty good mix because Brandon is so good at marketing right here, right now, right in front of you, and getting immediate feedback, immediate sales, immediate response. Really, really good at that. And I actually suck at that. And it's quite frankly why I actually asked him to become a business partner after I originally had hired him, because I knew my limitations. I knew I wasn't good.
You're in rarefied air as a CEO owner to know your limitations and to act accordingly on them. Well, so you're a ninja to start with, if that's the case.
Well, I just knew, one, like talking about yourself and marketing yourself, like that's a difficult and weird thing to do without looking and sounding like a douchebag. And Brandon could market knives, and maybe me as the owner and the knife maker behind the brand, and he could do that in a way that I can't do it. And if I do it, it looks really strange. But also, I don't know. I've been learning so many goddamn terms, as a CEO of this company, and all these marketing. I sit in all these marketing meetings and all these analytics and all these statistics, and then email campaigns and these different flows back and forth and e-com stacks. I mean, I still actually, I hear him say e-com stack and I just nod my head and I still don't know what the hell it is.
Right. You're like, I'm going to go design the next Stonewall.
Yeah, exactly. So
our jobs are very similar.
Yeah. But where I am good at is like, I do, and I enjoy it the most, is it's the people and it's the knowledge that I'm not sure how this potential relationship that I've built with this person is going to pay off. And I'm not looking for it, and I don't really care when or if it even really ever does, but it probably will. It might take 5 years. It might take 10. And I don't know what a payoff even necessarily is. It could be an introduction to another person. It could be a big order down the road for their company. It could be whatever. It doesn't matter. It could just be a supplier, like all of a sudden maybe you introduce me to someone who laser cuts steel, and I need, of course, I need that in my business. Like,
yes, that is the key. You're exactly on it, and that's what we've tried to work on too. And I've seen that as well. Like, just do good in the world and do good with your community and everyone you interface with. Yeah, there's some people that's going to be a very direct, I'm going to buy a giant weight room. Great, that's awesome. Right. Or I'm going to introduce you to so-and-so. Or sometimes it's cool to know that you helped out somebody.
Yep.
Like, pretty much always that.
Yeah.
And even if it just even works on yourself and going, hey, I'm going to do this. I'm going to audit myself and go, am I doing this for this person to help them out with no intention of anything coming back from it? The funny part is something always seems to come back from it. It's like, and biblically they talk about your cup overfloweth. The blessings come back so much more than, I mean, we try to give them out and they come back faster than we could even give them out. And it's a biblical principle. It's 10 times or 7 times, but it's like, holy cow, this is actually a thing. Like I tell Les sometimes, I look around and I go, we don't deserve this. And that doesn't mean physical manifestations of things, just the life that we have. And we don't deserve that.
Right.
And people, oh no, you deserve, no, stop with the deserving thing.
Right.
Like there are people that work so much harder than I do. There are people that do much better things for people.
Right.
Do I do some of those? Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
But there's not like oh, you've done these things now, you deserve the chunk of cheese.
Right.
Or whatever it is. But I agree with you, man. Like it always seems to come back in some way. But
and it was the same way when I was making custom knives. I always had, we called them in the knife community hammer-ins. So basically what Winterstrong is it's a hammer-in. Or another name for it that people more commonly call them is a conference.
Sure.
Right? But a conference
nerds call
seems, very nerdy and very boring.
Right.
Nobody wants to go to a conference. And but a hammer-in, what we used to do is I would fly in instructors from all over, frankly, the world, mostly from the U.S., but some from Germany and other places around Europe, Australia, Canada. These guys, I would find the guys that, frankly, selfishly, I wanted to learn from.
1,000%.
That I thought were doing epic stuff. And frankly, I even wanted to just meet them because they were kind of heroes of mine. And I thought, I know, I'm going to pay them to come to my shop. And then people are going to then pay to come to my shop because I couldn't afford to just give it away at that point. I was literally living paycheck to paycheck. And I started doing those hammer-ins and frankly couldn't even afford really to do them. I was putting it all on credit cards. And then once everyone paid their entry fee, it's like, okay, that paid for it.
Right. We squeaked by.
But we brought all these guys in, and that was what was really cool about the knife-making community. A guy like a Jason Knight or a Neil Kamamura, guys like that, right? We bring those guys in. Knife makers would pay to come and learn from them, and then they would pitch tents all over my property. We'd have 100, 120 people here. I catered, the golf course would cater a meal down here and friends with the golf course owner, and he'd bring breakfast and lunch down here. We'd have dinner. We'd shoot the bowling ball cannon, do all this different stuff. And really what came of it was the learning and the skills was definitely one thing, but the relationships was the part that was actually, it's the part you couldn't put your finger on. It was very easy to point out a skill that like, I learned this from Bert.
Right.
I learned this thing from Jason. Those relationships paid off way bigger than any of the skills over the years and those friendships that I still have today. And it was powerful, and it was 100 people camped together for 3 days every June in Montana, and it was phenomenal. And we had knife customers that started catching on, and so I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to do this. I started a knife show at an art gallery in Missoula. We had the first year I did 5 makers. The next year I did 15. I ended up with 20 makers in it, 20 of like some of the best makers in the world, and we sold over $100,000 in knives in an hour. And it was in an art gallery. It was all really high end, really nice. But what was even better than that was those knife collectors hung out for the next 2 days at our shop and learned about how the knives they're buying are being made. And you would actually think people might want to hide, like, sometimes people want to hide how things are done, but the knife collectors found it incredible and actually respected more of the craft and the work. Like, I did not know the amount of work that goes into engrave or carve or do Damascus. And it makes them then want to turn around and buy more knives later.
Of course.
Because now they understand more of the art form.
Right.
But again, what we also developed through that was relationships with our collectors where they became like family.
Of course.
And it was I did that 6 or 7, 8 years in a row. And it was absolutely incredible up until, I quit and went to my lineman job. But
if you did one now, you wouldn't be able to. You'd have to.
Yeah, we're talking about it.
MKC hammering would be, yikes.
Yeah, we're talking about it. But
you're exactly right. Like, and the interesting thing you said, like 6, 7 years, whatever it may be. That's what I don't think people understand is when you're doing that slow drip kind of trickle of building roots in a network. you can't do it in a year, 2 years. You could be on a rocket ship. That's great. But like the ones who succeed, I tell people, I said, look at whoever's popping or blowing up right now. And I'll guarantee they were doing some iteration of that 10 years ago.
Yeah.
They just no one knew them yet. So
Right.
they were doing the work. Right.
Right.
And so, you didn't just start knife making. I didn't just start making weightlifting equipment or hunting or anything like that.
Right.
But
you were living in a gym while and your dad was also building this company, but you were also training and learning the physical fitness part. And
mentality of competing,
everything.
like all those things. But you look at anyone, like I kind of laugh and go, okay, like let's go back to Cameron Haynes, Joe Rogan, John Dudley, like any of those guys you talk to, Jocko, whatever, all of them were doing the stuff 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago.
Right. Before they got out of high school, they were doing some of this.
Yeah, all of that. And then you go, oh, okay, so not only do you have this giant body of work, you're a professional at it, and also the roots that you have. I kind of laugh, people will go, gosh, sometimes we'll get these weight rooms from so-and-so state university and my competitors will come in and try to do whatever they do. And I laugh, I go, you don't remember that guy was in my wedding.
Right.
Or that guy I competed against 25 years ago, and we used to stay at each other's houses every summer. Although we were in the same conference, we would have training camps together at 20 years old.
Right.
Like there's some strong roots there, man.
Yes.
Like, but you can't go by that. You can't, but if you do that for 20 or 30 years, you have a lot of roots at different places of people that those relationships are the portfolio.
Somebody said at Attack, like MKC is like an overnight success. And I think Brandon said, it's a 30-year overnight success.
Right.
Because even same thing with Brandon on the marketing side. Like he's been running marketing for different companies in different industries for 20 years. Yeah. Went to college, master's degrees, like all the, couple different bachelor degrees, then a bunch of experience succeeding and failing in other companies, and probably more failing early on before a lot of succeeding, to get to the point where he has his own company that he now knows, like, okay, I'm ready. Now I know how to build and how to market and how to do, his end of it.
And I kind of always see it that way. Like the experience just limits options in a way. Like if there's 100 things you could do, experience tells you that 70 of them are stupid. So now you're really only down to 30. Yeah. Which is just a higher probability of success. 1 out of 30 shots, I'll take more than 1 out of 100. And so like, that's where you just start, you could jettison off shitty ideas. Yeah. And you don't always have the right answers, but you certainly know the wrong ones faster. Right. And it's very interesting. It's kind of people said about Sorinex too, like, oh, you guys blew up. And it's like, yeah, we're kind of like a 10-year startup with 35 years of momentum and behind it.
Yeah. So what year did your dad make the first rack in the backyard?
1980. So we're at 43 years
before I was born.
Yeah, I was 4.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the thing. It's like we had Sorin playgrounds, we had Sorin equipment. We were doing them and playgrounds, obviously, you know what those are, and then equipment was the strength side. We condensed it down to Sorin equipment. In 1992, we rebranded to Sorin because it was Sorin exercise equipment, and we cut it to Sorin X, kind of changed it, just more branding. 1992, I came on full time in 99. So I'm coming up on.
Was that just coming out of college?
Kyle, yeah. So my first day was July 1, 1999. So I'm coming up on 24 years.
Okay.
So yeah, exactly. But I didn't come with, hey, we're going to take over the world. This is my dad's passion project. He's been in it 19 years at the time. Right. He's struggled. He's done all the things, done everything right and everything wrong and everything in between. Right. And had no business mentors, you just.
How many employees did your dad have at that point in 99? You think how big was Sorinex?
Well, I think we had 7 at the shop and him. Wow. And then we farmed it out to another company, American company here, and they had like 16 employees. We farmed out some of that. So we were design, marketing, sales. Marketing is a very loose term.
They were doing some of the manufacturing.
They were doing the manufacturing. And then in 2008-ish, somewhere right around there, we got back into the manufacturing side ourselves and just retook it back in just to make sure we had just a better customer experience. But when we had that, I still have a guy right now, this is my logistics manager. This was 2012. Mm-hmm. At 2012, he came in, we hired him. And I remember he told me he's still there. He's all the time, killing it. And Matt goes, he goes, man, I remember I was number 11 employee. And he goes, and I was kind of afraid that I didn't get in early enough.
Yeah.
And I think we went to like 208 during COVID.
Damn.
And so and so he laughs now and he's like, and still out of those 11 people, half of them aren't there anymore. So he's like, still 4 or 5 in the stack.
Keeps moving up.
And then so he's laughing. He's like, oh, to think that I was kind of like, got in late, I go, oh dude, like it was just, we were just getting probably like where you guys are. Like you just get enough ass behind you to really start doing some amazing things.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it just took us 34 years to get there.
So what was your degree? Because you were throwing hammer in college, right?
Yeah, I picked the most obscure sport to be good at.
Yeah.
Reduces competition. So no, it's actually the most technical event in track and field, which is again very dumb.
Now, do they throw hammer in any high schools really at all?
I think like New York, there's like 3 or 4 states that throw it, maybe 5 states that throw it now.
Because they're trying
at
to
least
get,
when I was, there might be more now.
There's some colleges trying to get Sadie to come throw shot put for them, but they're all talking like
she'd be a badass.
They'd be hammer thrower. Yeah,
she'd be a badass.
And
women's hammer throw in the 90s and through 2000s was the best ride in the park for college because they still scored at NCAAs and they still scored the exact same amount of points as they do for the 100. And you look at it like every fast girl in America runs the 100,
right?
And very few people throw the hammer, but they put the same amount of points on the board. So I used to laugh. I'd go, "Hey, you want your daughter to get a scholarship? If she's kind of big and strong and has good feet, teach her to throw the hammer. She's going to get a full ride somewhere because they need them.
And that's kind of traditionally too. I think it's getting it's definitely getting more difficult now, but that's kind of how golf was for a long time.
Sure,
women's golf was like, my buddy who was a golf pro, he's like, dude. And this was when my kids were 4 or 5 years old. He's like, if your kids are athletic, if your daughters are athletic, have them play golf. He's like, it's like so easy to get a scholarship.
Print money.
Handing them out.
Yeah. So for me, hammer was kind of dumb in some ways because it's like really hard on your body. It's really technical.
Were you a shot putter in high school or disc?
A crappy discus thrower that also threw shot.
Okay.
So I walked on, really stupid, funny story, but I walked on like very Forrest Gump, like at South Carolina. And they were like, hey, have you ever thrown a hammer? I'm like, no, I've never even seen one. They're like, oh, well, everyone throws hammer here because it's a good skill to learn. I'm like, okay, fine. So I actually got a little bit better at that. I also threw javelin, and then I kind of took off with the hammer and the weight. But learning that, but it was actually, I didn't realize by learning that skill, like that being my sport, you learn to work and train in the dark. There's no one that gives a shit that you're a hammer thrower.
Yeah.
And so you just learn to go, okay, I'm going to pick something really, really hard that's going to take a long time to get good at, kind of like knife making, kind of like business, kind of like archery, kind of like all these things, right? You can't short circuit it.
Right.
I'm going to pick the most technically advanced thing to do that doesn't rely on anyone but me, and I have to do it until I'm good, and they're going to measure it every week. And if I'm good at it, I get to keep doing it. And if I suck, I have to go do something else.
Right.
And so I look back and I go, oh, it was the perfect sport for me. It was the perfect sport, not for that time, but it was the perfect sport to teach me what I needed to know in life.
Yeah.
And so there was no spotlight. There was no, you get all the girls because you're a good hammer thrower. You go to be a good hammer thrower because you want to throw the hammer, and it has to be totally intrinsic.
And you also know there's not going to be a big future in it after college.
No, there's not. Like I'm going to make millions of dollars.
Might make the Olympics, but even if you do that, you're probably not going to make millions of dollars.
I made the most money I ever made was $600.
No shit.
As a professional hammer thrower in a day.
Damn.
$600. I bought a trolling motor.
I bet you were stoked too.
Oh yeah, I was. I bought
a trolling motor.
I went from the national championships at indoors in Atlanta, and I drove to Bass Pro Shops on my way home and bought a Minn Kota trolling motor that I actually used the other day. I was 20-something years ago. I still use it.
God, you got to hang that thing in the museum.
Exactly. So I laughed, but it was such a good teaching aid because it was like, oh, right. If you want to do this thing, go be good at it because you want to do it. Mm-hmm. No one cares.
Yeah.
No one gives a shit.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to work really, really hard because it's like no one just is a good hammer thrower. There's guys that are fast because they woke up fast and they picked the right parents, right? Mm. no one's good at this sport unless you put in a stupid amount of work. Probably like knife making. There's no one that's just like, boom, got it. This thing's great. And
now
so,
you got, I mean, like you say, you got actually got real good at it. I mean,
yeah.
How did you do at nationals?
Well, I've placed up in the top parts.
And then you were
times.
in the trials,
I was
right?
in the Olympic trials in 2000 and 2004.
Okay.
And then, so I had a good run. I was ranked in the world a couple times during Olympic years and things like that. So I say I probably was one of the better guys that didn't have a coach at the time that actually held down a real job and was not on drugs.
Yeah.
Not to say everyone was on drugs, but that was definitely during the drug era. And you look at all the Eastern Bloc in the stands.
Oh my gosh.
And you're like, yeah, okay.
I was pretty good.
Yeah, you're like, all right, well, if I'm 65th in the world out of the thousands of hammer throwers and all these guys are in the Eastern Bloc countries and they do this and I run Sorinex 50 hours a week and then I'm a professional athlete at 5:30 p.m. and I did a install of a weight room last week. I didn't get a train for a week. Like, all right, I'll take that as a win.
It's like being the guy that came in 17th in the Tour de France and then way later on down the road, he finds out the top 16 were doing drugs. And he's like, oh, I was actually like the best that wasn't.
And he has to go back to being like a air traffic controller.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that, So I'm not saying that I was that level. I mean, there were certainly better guys than me, but I felt like I was able to achieve a pretty high level. But in 2004, I also came to the realization that I had trained for 5 years as a professional. I had 4 more years until my next shot at the Olympics was going to put me at 2008. I'd thrown competitively for over 10 years and more than college plus high school. So I go, okay, I've competed for a long time. I put a lot of other things on the back burner socially, all the types of things like that. But I also said, okay, if I'm going to really take a real shot at the Olympics, I'm either going to have to, in my assessment, I was going to have to do drugs. Mm-hmm. I was going to have to move to some other place with a full-time coach, put everything into that, leave my business, leave my everything. And I go, what if you do all that and you have a bad day at the Olympic trials?
Right.
And then you go, oh, I just gave away Sorinex because I wanted to get Olympic rings tattooed on me. That seems very, very selfish. So I said,
and you do see, you see those guys at the Olympics, men and women, that they're literally at the Olympics. They've made it to the Olympics, which is already a giant achievement in itself. And they're in their final race or throw or whatever, and they come up with a hamstring or something.
Right.
And it boggles my mind.
Oh,
it boggles my mind because I can't imagine. I just can't imagine the time, the effort, everything that they built to get that point, and the disappointment level has to be where their body let them down at that moment, or they tripped or false started. I mean, it's mind boggling. Just got sick, just got the flu. I mean,
oh, sure. Well, that was what Croucher was telling me about at the 2020 Olympics, 2021, whatever it was in Tokyo. He said that they were testing him every morning for COVID. So, the whole Olympic Village was quarantined. He said, so you sat in your room all day long hoping the phone didn't ring. And he goes, literally, he said, as I was walking on the track to compete, he goes, once I stepped foot on the track, they couldn't call me anymore. He goes, up until that second, I could be pulled at any minute. And he goes, it felt like 1,000 pounds was lifted off my shoulders when I walked on the track. You're like, what did that stressor do to him?
Oh, the performance of all those athletes.
All those guys. Like, how would anyone ever compete well? Because you try to reduce as much stress so you could recover to be in the parasympathetic versus sympathetic nervous system, and you go, you're wired for sound. And he said his suite mate popped hot the day before. Oh, so he's sitting there going, I've been training for 5 years now, and I just broke the world record, and I'm about to potentially give away my Olympic potential.
Especially now that we know what we know now about COVID, which I think a lot of us, we're starting to figure that out very quickly.
Right.
After the first few months of it. But looking back on it now to see whether it's people that lost jobs over COVID or lost an opportunity with sports, and especially with now that we know what we know now with how much just being healthy and fit is an advantage that none of those people are really, in my opinion, quite frankly, the only real risk to them was the actual goddamn shot itself. You know,
I don't disagree with that.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's
crazy.
Yeah, I mean, and we were all talking about it, right? It was, not to go down that rabbit hole, but what part of eating well, vitamin D,
Yeah.
hydration, exercise. I mean, that I'm not going to say that would have solved everything, but let's be really honest. If you've been alive in the last 20 years, you've heard of those things.
Yeah.
Like you probably need, if not, this was a wake up call, maybe go ahead and like put those into the variable list. Right.
And if it wasn't for, quite honestly, if it wasn't for Joe Rogan, I just don't even know actually where we would be. Cause I swear half the time that his podcast single-handedly keeps things from just spinning all the way off the edge.
I agree. I agree.
Mean, I heard a stat on his latest podcast with, I think it was Robert Kennedy.
Which is a great podcast.
I think Kennedy, it really was. And I think Kennedy said on there, what do you say, something like 300,000 CNN viewers, then Tucker was somewhere around 4 million, and Rogan's episodes are something like 40 million. And they were talking about how big Tucker was and is, and his numbers, and the fact that Rogan's literally 10 times the size of Tucker. And that's not including the people that just sit at work and tell everybody at work what Rogan said.
Right.
And that message spreads from 40 million people to literally almost everyone.
Yes.
It's mind-boggling.
It is mind-boggling. And I agree. I mean, in my opinion, Rogan is not only a national treasure, not kissing his ass, but it's just, if you really look at the numbers, I think he's a world treasure in some ways, because he has enough juice that kind of whatever could be said. And I'm not saying one side of the political, at least if for free speech, he's one of the last bastions of free speech, which
really
uncancelable.
You know,
if they hadn't pulled it off by now.
Yeah, I mean, they gave it a good shot, and it really didn't even get close. And, only certain people, only real special people, it's funny, not many people would compare Trump and Rogan, but one thing both of them are very good at is not reading the comments.
Yes.
I mean,
post and ghost.
Trump will just do his thing, and he doesn't give a shit. His own kids could tell him, Dad, don't do this, don't do that. Trump is going to do his thing right or wrong.
Superpower.
And Rogan, if shit starts heating up or whatever with Rogan, he just literally just won't open the internet and look at it. And very few people say, I don't read the comments.
The strength of that is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think both of them have superpowers, different superpowers, but similar.
Yeah.
That Rogan can, stay from even thinking to look at it. And I have to hand it to Trump, man. Like, to be able to keep pushing forward in what you believe unapologetically in the face of unbelievable pushback.
Yeah.
I don't care if you like him or hate him. You got to respect him.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
And really, quite frankly, with some of the stuff that's happened lately with the Twitter files being exposed and and all the Russia stuff, dossier stuff, like so many of these things, a lot of the stuff that, quite honestly, even to someone like me and some of his supporters of back when he was actually president, and saying some of those things like, okay, man, like, I don't know if it's all like that, actually that rigged against you. And, not that, and I'm not talking about like election counting vote stuff.
Right.
I'm just talking about just like everybody actively working against him. And then you find out like, no, man, like the CIA, FBI, and everybody basically in government working actively, including social media and real regular media, all teaming up to suppress, whether it's suppress stories about the other side or make up stories about Trump or suppress stuff. I mean, it's just kind of mind-boggling when you look back at it, what that guy put up with, quite frankly, from when he got elected, when they were bugging his actual freaking apartment.
Yeah. And again, to have the stones to keep to push forward. I mean, it's either one of two things. You have giant balls, and there's a sense of delusionment that he believes that you're right, and that's a superpower in itself. I mean, or it's you do have a lot of the answers, and you do know the answers, and you're just going to hold to your convictions.
Yeah.
It might be a combination of the two, but it's pretty amazing.
Combination of everything and ego. Yeah. There's definitely ego in there of just believing you're better and smarter. But you got, if you don't have that, you just can't put up to that kind of scrutiny.
No.
And it just blows my mind.
Yeah, I think it's inspirational at times because I'm like, man, I wish I could just not care what everyone said, or in face of somewhat, immeasurable odds, be like, no, here we go, let's go, tee it up, and you're just like, dude.
Yeah, and the only flack that like a person like you might receive would be a little flack from an employee or two. Like you're not going to receive, you're not, maybe a competitor a little bit, or
oh no, we got bombs threats.
Well,
I told you about that.
Well, with Trump Jr.
Yeah,
just because you're associated with him.
He got that weight room, bought the weight room from us, the gym from us. I mean, I guess
That's
I'm saying it public
I forgot
now.
about that. Yeah.
Yeah, he was nice enough to support my company, and he posted about it, which I very much appreciate because anyone who's supports our company, I appreciate. I reposted it. Next day, got a bomb threat at Sornex.
That's mind-boggling.
Mind-boggling. Thought it was okay. Maybe that was coincidence. A couple weeks later, post something else. He was throwing his kid in the pool. I was like, hey, man, looking strong. Again, I interface with my customer base.
Right.
And he said, yeah, the jammer arms are working great. Awesome. Liked it. No big deal. Move on. Bomb threat next day. Have to take 200 people out of my building.
Authorities do anything about it?
No, I mean, I know all the bomb guys. They walk around with the dogs. We sit out in the parking lot.
Yeah, and then investigation
Then go back into whatever.
Yeah.
And I mean, they try to track it, whatever. I mean, it's just, but it's just like, really, that's a thing.
Well, and that's the other thing.
Literally, like we're literally attacking businesses based on a customer.
Right.
I certainly posted when other people from other sides of the political aisle supported us.
Right.
And because I appreciate people supporting us.
Right. Yeah, 100%. And that's actually the other thing about Trump and his presidency and stuff is it actually boggled my mind of how well his family put up with it. Eric Trump and I text a little bit, Trump Jr. and I, obviously you're friends with him too. And I've told both of those guys I commend them for being able to even just keep their families together and put up with it. It's just mind-boggling.
Tough people, man.
And it was actually interesting because when Trump said he was running this time, Ivanka kind of right away was just like, I'm out. Like, I'm out of it. As far as just like, I'm not going to be a part of this one. And I can understand why, because she understands fully the fire that comes with that.
It's
I can't imagine. And I've told Eric and Junior both that one thing I really respect about those guys, take all the politics out of it and whatnot. Junior really is an amazing father. He really does an amazing job with his kids. Seems to be. Yeah. He really does with some of the things he exposes kids to, taking them fishing and taking them hunting and camping and letting them ride four-wheelers.
It's inspirational. I'm going, man, if he has time to do it, I got to do more of that.
There's that, but then also just, how wealthy that family is and where they live. Like a lot of the really wealthy people in those situations don't get their kids out of the city and into a tent in the woods. Yeah. And you have to actually make that happen. You have to kind of make that a point. And Junior does do that with his kids, which again, take all the politics out of it. Just take a wealthy kind of rich guy and how he's raising his kids. He's exposing them to, hunting, fishing, camping, outdoors, which shows them a part of the country that a lot of rich kids in big cities don't ever see. They don't ever get exposed to, a guide in Canada or Alaska or Montana and living in a tent or sleeping in a tent,
I agree. I mean, it's inspirational for someone to be very successful and still finds time to do those type of things. And of course I probably like it more because it's my type of things. Right. But still, I mean, doing hard things is hard, but hard things make us stronger. So, I mean, I think that's the biggest thing that we could be doing, interfacing our kids with hard things. You do it all the time. I do it to an extent. I don't do it as much as I'd like.
Yeah, same. Yeah. No, and I it's actually an adjustment I told my wife I'm going to try and make going forward, kind of after this year got so booked up that I actually told her I'm going to make more of an effort of some of these hunts and some of the stuff we're doing, some of these people, I'm going to try to maybe send even some other people along with and whatnot, and actually take my kids and my family on a little bit more of that stuff, because those years are like quickly going away.
Oh man. Yeah, you and me both. I actually just pulled my kids out of school. So they were going to homeschool.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The school they were going to was great, but what I started seeing was there was so much homework associated with everything when they'd come home, and they're still young. And it was a very active school. It was very, and we may go back, but there were so many extracurricular things. Maybe if I was a dad or we ran a family that didn't have a lot going on, or didn't interface with extremely extraordinary people constantly or had opportunity. If I was a dad that was sitting half drunk on the couch every night watching, I don't even know what's on TV, it's watching whatever thing that's on TV now, then having a school like that would be really, really necessary. But when I start looking at, I'm having to find childcare and having like stuff happen to make sure my kids get all their school done. So on the first day of Winterstrong, instead of going to Winterstrong, I go, wait, hold on a minute. Like I have 200 extraordinary people that you could learn a ton from, and they're out of it. And that's exactly, I would hope other people would bring their kids, and my kids are only there half the time, or Summer Strong, or even let's go say I do the install at Alabama, to be able to bring my kid there and be able to have him do a hard day of work, interface with super high level people in that world, see how excellence is done, and have a 5-hour trip in the car with my kid to talk to him. And then helps me check into hotels and do this, like do all that other world stuff that one day I'm not going to have him there. He's my oldest is 11, for all intents and purposes, you give him another 7 years and he's gone.
So Danny Bolton told me the other night sitting in the living room, we were talking about all this exact stuff. And he said he heard a stat, kind of mind-boggling and also very depressing, that when your kids turn 18 and leave home, you
95.
will have spent 90%.
Yeah. I heard it's 93, 95, something like that.
Yeah, 90% of the time that you'll ever spend with your child, you will have spent. So you got 10%, 5 to 10%, depending on maybe where your child ends up, left with your child.
Yes.
Before you're gone.
I heard the same thing, and that was, I think, the straw that broke the camel's back.
Same.
It was like, yep, no, we're doing something different.
So after Danny and I talked about that, I told my wife, we were sitting actually in the hot tub that night, and I was like, the time that we just spent like with Derek bear hunting, or some of the hunts that I have planned this fall and whatnot that are already on the schedule, like next year I'm doing that all different. I'm going to do it different because, Hank's 15, Macy, she asked me, and we scheduled all this stuff in New Mexico, and then she asked me, she's like, when am I going to get to go elk hunt? And I was like, God damn, it hit me, like I felt bad. Like,
of course.
I didn't even know it was really that important to her. She'd kind of mentioned she'd like to go, but I didn't know it was like really something she wanted to do, and she really wants to go.
Right.
So frankly, don't have time for it this fall, but I'm going to make it happen one way or the other.
You got to, because
I go flyer down at the tail end of one or something.
Yeah, you gain all this, and then you lose what you're doing it all for. And I think I talked to, after Neil passed, I was Neil Curry. I was talking to Lucas O'Hara, and we were talking about, and I'm sure you've heard the term, like your first row of your funeral, and I always try to put that, and for those who haven't heard it, they said your first row of your funeral, you're in the casket, the first row are the people whose lives will be forever changed by your not being there. And then the second row are there to support the first row, and everyone else is probably on their phone.
Yeah.
And, I know that's it's a very abrupt way to put it.
Right. A little calloused, but it's
not far off.
Yeah.
If they're not on their phone, then they are when they get in the parking lot.
Right.
Probably.
Right.
And so I start looking like, okay, I'm doing all this stuff, not only for our community, great, and my customer basis and however I want to spin it, but I have 4 other little people that live in my house, 3 little ones and a female big one.
Yeah.
And I realize a lot of times I give a lot more to that rest of the room.
Right. And they're going to be the front row.
And they are the front row.
Right.
Right. And I think about that literally every time I leave. I left the house at 3:30 this morning.
Right.
And I leave and I'm going, what if this is the day?
Right.
What if this is the day I don't walk through this door again? Is my bill paid up? Am I good with everyone?
And I'll actually say, like, the sports thing, like if I did it all different, I did it all again with my kids, raising them from day one, like we were super heavily involved in the AAU sports and a lot of the travel ball stuff. I coached it all and whatnot. And I guess the the good thing about it, the way we did it, is at least I was coaching, so I was pretty actively involved with it. I coached girls basketball, boys football, like all this stuff, right? And the one thing that's been kind of interesting is I actually asked all my kids, I've asked them, like, what was your greatest so far? Like, Demi's graduated now, Sadie's going to be a senior, Hank's going to be a freshman. And I asked him, I said, what's your greatest game? What's your greatest accomplishment? Like, what's your favorite game you ever played of all your sports?
Sure.
Like, what's your game? And they were like, none of them could answer it. And Hank's like, well, I made probably the championships with football. And I was like, no, that's not like one game. Like, tell me a game and tell me why. Like, what about that game? Did you make a play? And none of them could really name a game.
Wow.
And I said, all right, so tell me about that buck right there, and tell me about that buck. And every hunt we've ever been on, and even a lot of the hunts we went on, we didn't shoot anything. They remember not just like that deer and that, like, that moment they shot it, but they remember where we parked the camper. They remember how many days we hunted. They remember how far in we hiked. They remember little, like, things about, like, we walked in and it was really frosty, and then as we were walking out, it had warmed up, and then it got super muddy, and there was mud on our boots. And, like, they remember the detail that's, like, mind-boggling. And I wished I would have realized this 10 years ago, but they were still young and doing their thing in sports. But, like, we missed a lot of opportunities to go hunt or go do some things, like maybe family trips and stuff, because of sports. And it's all good. I think the sports are fantastic, and they teach you so much. However, it's all remembered as a whole. But
sports
are remembered as a whole generally for my kids. I'm just speaking for mine. They just remember, like, kind of all of it.
Right.
It's been busy, right? And it's year round. It's baseball, volleyball in the fall, it's basketball, it's football, it's track, and on around, right? And the point of that is when you take them and you do things like that have, like, an impression and an impact, like taking them hunting when they're 11 or 12, and you camp in a tent and you make, a peak refuel meal over a jet boil, and you start a fire in the woods, and then you kill something, and it's all so visceral and all so impactful that they never forget it. It's
super imprinted,
crazy imprinted. Yeah. And I was thinking to myself, like, Macy's 13, like, I got 5 years left.
Yes.
To put more of those in her brain in between softball and basketball and all the stuff she's still doing.
Sure.
And actually, hunting is the only thing that Hank will miss a sporting activity for. Right. Like, last year, he missed a week of practice and a football game. And honestly, like, he wouldn't miss that for anything. But we went archery elk hunting in New Mexico, and shot that elk. And I told him this year, I'm like, hey, man, if you want to go back, you can, but, like, now you're a freshman. It's a high school. You're going to miss a high school game. He's likely going to be on varsity. And he's like, I'm going hunting. I mean, it was just like...
Yeah, because in the grand scheme of things, like, okay, he could also have the flu one week and miss a game of football.
Right.
Like,
right.
And I don't know. That's how I've always seen it. For me, training and hunting were always very high, but I hate to say I always generally put hunting a bit higher.
Yeah. Well, and it made it easier for me to do that, because before, up until I really started MKC, I was the coach for all this stuff. So now it's hard to leave.
Of course.
Because, like, Hank's the quarterback and I'm the coach. Well, it's kind of tough to leave for a week.
Right. Have you ever asked them, it's interesting that you're saying that, because I had a similar thing. I was asking my son, we were driving the car the other day, and I've started, looking back into, like, the love languages, how do people accept and how do they love and how do they accept love or acceptance or whatever it may be. I don't know how familiar you are with that.
Yeah, a little bit.
A little bit. So Luke Day, a strength coach friend of mine down at South Carolina, he does, he interviews each kid at University of South Carolina football, these just big monsters, and he interviews them enough to figure out their love language. And and it's wild. So what he was saying was 95% of the kids there that didn't have a dad growing up almost always have words of affirmation and quality time as their two love languages.
Really?
And he said, it's crazy. He said, you'll get a dirt scrap poor kid that's never had anything. He goes, you give him all these new pair of shoes and all this cool swag, and you'd think he'd be forever grateful. He goes, they don't give a shit. They want to know, do you care about me? Are you there for me? Because that's what they missed.
Yeah.
And so he would talk to the kids. I know it's kind of a weird thing. I'll come back to it, but he said, because you look at it, and we just posted this on our Sorin podcast, but he talks about it on that podcast. He said, you take a football kid that's in the SEC playing football. He goes, he all he wants are those words of affirmation that he probably didn't get. He goes, so you wonder why he doesn't go to class. He doesn't get affirmation in math class.
Right.
When he catches a touchdown, he goes on the Jumbotron in front of 85,000 people and everyone cheers his name and they buy his jersey. That's what he cares about.
Right.
And you could like it or dislike it, but realize that's the hole in his heart that he or she needs. And so trying to figure that out with my son, I was riding the other day. I was like, hey, how do you know that daddy loves you? And he goes, well, because you tell me. I said, well, okay, good. At least I told him. And then I said, well, how do you know it? Like, how does daddy show it the most? Like, when do you feel most loved? And I'm thinking, I'm asking an 11-year-old, so who knows what you're going to get, right? And out of all the stuff that I try to do and, buy or take on trip, like all this stuff, he's like, when we wrestle, he goes, and when we have donut talks. And donut talks only happened twice. And there was a time he was having a hard time at school and some girls were being mean to him, whatever, and he was pretty bummed out. And I was like, hey, buddy, let's grab 2 donuts. Let's go back and sit in the back room and let's just talk. And I just asked, kind of like counseling appointment, I said, let's eat these donuts and let me just dig into what's going on. I didn't say it that way, but I basically did a counseling appointment with him. And we only did it twice. And to this day, he still says that was the most he felt loved by me is eating donuts.
Wow.
And then so I was talking to another buddy of mine the other day. We were talking about training and keeping up with your diet, this and that. And I was like, I'm going to keep up with it. But if my son needs to go eat donuts and talk about that, or my wife wants to have a glass of wine and sit there and spend quality time, sorry, man, I don't need a 6-pack that bad.
Right. Right.
So but it was just a very interesting thing of all the stuff, wrestling and donut
What
talks.
about for you? I mean, when you look back on your childhood, all the sports that you did and whatnot, and your relationship with your dad and your father, what do you remember? What do you remember that showed you the most love or that you look back the most fondly on?
Yeah, it's interesting because my dad generally showed love specifically in gifts because that was just how his dad showed him love. His dad wasn't around, so he would buy something for him. So I would get like a knife or like little hunting stuff. So that's what I've learned. Mm-hmm. But I realize I probably want words of affirmation the most. Mm-hmm. And that was, but then I'm an only child, right? An only child from a single parent, didn't have a brother, an older brother or older sister to be my advocate. So I was like, I'd go and all of my friends had older brothers and sisters. So I'd either get my ass kicked or I'd be getting picked on. And, when you're younger, when I was like the youngest kid in the neighborhood and I didn't have an older brother, like you're just not read in to as many things, right? Yeah. So you get taken advantage of, you get made fun of, you didn't know about the whatever. So you just learn to like navigate those situations. But then also like you learn to want to put wins on the board. Like you don't want to be the butt of jokes. You want to be successful. You want to be, so I kind of learned like, okay, like words of affirmation are probably my thing. It's not people kissing my ass, but knowing like, I mean, what if you've ever read the book Wild at Heart? It's a fantastic book, but it talks about every man has a hole in his heart, a question. And that question is, am I good enough?
Right.
A woman generally feels, do you see me? Am I appealing? Am I one to be pursued? Mm-hmm. And a man, I mean, why do men go to war? Why do they work hard to make a lot of money? Why do they go do sports? Why do they try to go kill the biggest buck? Why do they run a zillion miles? Why do they make awesome knives? Am I good enough? Mm-hmm. Is MKC good enough to compete with the other ones? Is Sorinex good enough? All that.
Yeah.
And you look at it and you're like, oh, as men, that's what we want. Like whether we like it or not, that's how we're geared.
Right.
And so I think, especially as someone who grew up without a dad in the household, I would visit him, but the male role model was, am I good enough?
Right.
And I think for years that was, I think in a way I inadvertently took on the the attributes that my dad found positive, strong, capable,
right,
confident, all those things. Right. And those are the things that I went after looking for.
Yeah. That affirmation.
But then those became things that I also respected and wanted out of life.
Sure.
So it's just really interesting when you start digging down to like, why do we do things? And then the people around you understanding like, why do they do things? Because that solves a lot of problems when you can understand how you're speaking to them and what they're looking for. And, you give someone a gift and they're like, well, I would rather we just sat down and have coffee, because like, that's what I care about is the
time.
Like my wife cares nothing about gifts. She's time, 100% time.
Yeah.
Like that's her thing.
Yeah.
But sometimes I'm not geared that way. And that's generally when I have problems. It's not her problem. It's my problem.
Right. Right. So. Yeah. 100%. No, it's cool. And it's that's actually something, that time thing is, it's interesting. Jess and I've had a couple, I wouldn't say heated discussions, but like discussions back and forth, because I'll be like, what's wrong? What's going on? Like in the house at night, right? Something I can tell, something's not right. I have this like sixth sense. I can tell, and nothing's wrong. Okay, well, something's wrong. What's wrong? Quit bullshitting me here. And it's like, well, I just, because it's usually like, hey, I'm headed to go do something or whatever at 7:00 at night. And she's like, finally admits, and she's like, well, I just don't feel like I've seen you enough. And I'm like, and my response is, we work in the same building.
We've been here. I've seen you 400 times a day.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of times it's like, I'm in here at my desk or in my office and I'm on one of these podcasts or a meeting. She's busy doing her stuff, and we'll cross by in the hallway, and it's like, how's it going? Good. Yeah, blah, blah. And like you say, I saw her 10 times. And we're literally working. For me, I feel like it's super special because I know she's right over there.
Right.
So like, that's good enough for me.
Right.
Like, she's in the building.
Yeah.
For her, like if I just stop and give her a hug and be like, how's it going? And talk to her for a minute, like that's all she needs. Like,
are you seeing her? Is she being pursued?
Right.
Like it goes
exactly.
Right back to
it does. It goes right back to it. And so then we're in the house and we're having a discussion, and I'm like, I don't understand. Like, but, it's kind of crazy. So like every now and then I'm like, okay, I need to stop for a second. And
it's predictably crazy. And I'm a repeat offender. I do I'm so stupid. 100%. I do the same thing. And I'm like, you're so dumb. Why do you keep, I know. You would have thought I would have learned by now, but
exactly. Yeah. Well, we should probably, we got friends here.
We got arrows to shoot on the solstice.
Yeah, exactly. So
you got to whip up on Danny
could do
Bolton.
this for hours, but, yeah, Danny, he's terrible at shooting a bow.
Yeah, I hope he breaks a string or something before I get down there, so I could pretend I could have beaten him.
Yeah, I was thinking about trying to figure out a way to take an extra turn on his dial or something. He's shooting pretty good.
Yeah, spin the turret. Yeah, Danny is a beast. Like, I'm pretty sure he's actually Jason Bourne.
Yeah,
and he just says he's like a Hawaiian kid that does. I still don't really know what he does, but
he does
a little everything, but a little too well.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, exactly. Just really, really good at everything that he does.
It's like, I don't really ever shoot rifles. It's like, ding, 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 ding.
Yeah.
I don't shoot pistols. Ding, 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 ding. It's like,
Yeah.
I think he was like in some weird, Jason Bourne, wreck and doesn't know who he is, but he has these weird skills that he's like, he knows what speed he could run at this elevation before he gets
Exactly. I feel like when he goes back to draw back his bow, there's calculator.
It's like Terminator in his head.
Locks on, yeah.
And he doesn't realize that everyone else doesn't have that.
Yeah, exactly. He's like, oh yeah, shooting pretty good. That one was a little high, 2 inches high, 100.
While it's in the air, he calls it.
Yeah, exactly.
Calculations tell me that's 2 inches high.
Yeah, when we were shooting last night and it was almost dark, and he was telling me oh yeah, that one was a little high or that one was a little low, and I was thinking, that you can't see that. You're making that shit up. And I walk up there and I'm like, and I've actually still got good vision. I'm getting to that age where I keep waiting for it to go bad, but it's still good. And
Mine's going now. It sucks.
I don't understand how he's seeing those arrows.
He has some freaky abilities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As soon as it leaves the bow, it's like the calculations run in his head. And he's like, that's a good one. That one's not good.
Hit. Yeah, you got the Nosslers here.
Yep.
And you got cold creamer, as I call
cold creamer, whole creamer.
Yeah. Yeah, the man with
the legend.
I think when we were at Sig Hunter Games, he had, I had to check that video. I think he had 7 hoods on at the same time. It was like a Russian nesting hood. It was amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah, he just kept peeling them back. I'm like, are you seriously walking around? He's like, yeah, I'm cold. I'm like, you live in Alaska. How are you cold?
Exactly. No, we got a heck of a group, so
yeah.
We'll get to it. But thanks again for coming. You guys flew or landed 3 hours from where your actual destination was, so it means a lot. You guys made the effort.
Of course.
We got to get in a car and drive right back kind of in the direction you just flew from.
We weren't going to come to Montana and not come see you, man.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Thanks for having us at the sleepover.
For sure. What, by the way, just for people that maybe aren't familiar, what's your Instagram or like
Bert Sorin, BERTSORIN, Bert Sorin, or you could do Sorinx or Sorinx Outdoors. All kind of has similar content, but down different rabbit holes.
Yeah, and for people that want to go check that out, like the Sorinx website, you can go on and see
Sorinx.com.
Yeah, Sorinx.com, what you guys have built, the gyms you've built for high schools, colleges, professional athletes, the military. It's just really, really cool. And then the way that you've combined all that with the outdoors, your love of the outdoors, Pops, your dad, the outdoors, Wesley.
Mr. Wesley.
There's just so much to.
We need to make a turtle hunting knife called the Mr. Wesley.
Exactly, we do. That'd be
awesome.
good. Yeah. All right. Thanks, brother.
All right, man. Thanks, man.